Nvidia stock is currently trading at about $138, and there's a lot of discussion in the market that it could potentially reach $800 by 2030. If that happens, that's a 6x return in 6 years, which is phenomenal. In this video, I'm going to show a valuation of when that will be a possibility and what has to happen for that to become a reality. Based on that, you can make a decision whether it's possible or not, and in the end, I will give out my opinion as well. Let me show you the valuation first. As you can see on the screen, for the 800 price target by 2030 to happen, Nvidia has to grow their revenue by 30% year over year for the next 6 years to make about $627 billion of revenue. And they have to continue to maintain their current net profit margin of 53% even in 2030 to get about $329 billion of net income. And they also have to command the same multiple as current, which is 50. And finally, they have to do a buyback of 3% of their shares every year until 2030. And if all of these happen together, then $800 will be a reality. So let me go over each of these items, and I'm going to discuss about what has to happen for them to become a reality. Let's first go over the 2030 revenue projection of $627 billion. For this to become reality, AI monetization has to be reality. And we will only know that in 2026 and 2027 because currently a lot of companies and governments around the world are developing AI apps. And it's going to take some time, a year or two, before they realize whether it is making good enough money for them or not, whether it's profitable to continue to spend on that AI infrastructure or not. If not, they're going to pull back their expenditure, and that's going to directly affect the likes of Microsoft Azure, Amazon's AWS, and Google Cloud. And they will then cut back on their capex on AI infrastructure, and that's going to hit directly for Nvidia. So AI monetization has to happen significantly for this to become a reality. And secondly, Nvidia itself is developing better and better chips, faster and cheaper chips as the time goes, and that's going to affect them negatively in the long run because, for example, their Nvidia's Blackwell chip is 2.5 times faster than the Hopper chip, but it's not 2.5 times expensive. So as the time goes by, Nvidia will develop better and better products for cheaper prices, and that's going to hit their revenue. So we have to take that also into consideration when looking into this $627 billion of revenue. And also there's a new threat in the form of XPUs. A lot of big clients of Nvidia like Google, Meta, TikTok, OpenAI, etc. they are collaborating with the likes of Broadcom and Marvell to come up with this XPU which are much cheaper than the Nvidia's GPUs and that take less electricity, that are very focused for a particular workload which suits these clients, right? So that revenue will go to Broadcom and not Nvidia. So we have to look into that threat as well because biggest clients of Nvidia are going to split their capex into GPUs and XPUs, and that's going to hit Nvidia as well. So we have to keep that also into consideration because a lot of these companies do not have infinite capex. Microsoft, for example, is putting 90 billion now, and Meta is giving 50 billion, right? So if that gets split into XPUs and GPUs, and that's going to definitely affect Nvidia. So we have factors like these. There are more. I don't want to make this video too long. So a lot of these things have to be taken into consideration to see if this number will be a reality. And in my personal opinion, it will not be a reality unless AI monetization happens in a big way, which I completely doubt. Now let's look into the assumed net profit margin of 53%. That's another aspect that has to play out for this $800 price target to pan out. Currently, Nvidia's gross margins are 74% or so, and then they are achieving close to 53% net profit margins. This is because a lot of companies are competing for these Nvidia's chips because everybody are investing in this AI infrastructure, and there is scarcity because there's a bottleneck in the manufacturing of these chips from the likes of TSMC, ASML, etc. So there's a lot of demand, therefore Nvidia is hiking up its prices. But in 2030, there will not be this scarcity because TSMC is working on expanding its infrastructure. And ASML, and also everybody in the supply chain of chips are investing in their infrastructure. So the scarcity will not be there. The companies won't be too desperate to pay whatever premium that Nvidia gives, right? So in my opinion, 53% is not sustainable in 2030. I would probably think it would be about 35% or so. But in conclusion, I don't think 53% is viable at 2030. Now let me move on to the multiple of 50. Currently people are paying a multiple of 50 because Nvidia is growing significantly. But past 2030, when they are at $627 billion of revenue, it's very hard for them to grow, because even a 20% would result in $120 billion of growth, which is very hard to do. So I think they will get a multiple of 35 or 40 at max and not 50. So I think even this multiple of 50 will not be a reality in 2030. And finally, the number of shares, currently they have about 25 billion outstanding shares, and I'm assuming 3% buyback each year. Don't think that 3% is less, because Nvidia is already a $3.5 trillion company. 3% is 100 billion, and Nvidia currently makes close to 65, 68 billion dollars, right? And they also pay dividend. And 3% buyback, in my opinion, is very optimistic. But if that happens, then the number of outstanding shares will be 20.4 billion, and 16.5 trillion market cap and 20.4 billion outstanding shares will give me a stock price of $807, which would give me a 6x, right? So overall, I think most of these assumptions are not going to be a reality, and I don't think $800 is possible unless some miracle happens that I'm not aware of. But I'm going to do a separate video on a realistic valuation of Nvidia for 2030. Stay tuned for that. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you so much for watching.